1st Regiment of New York Volunteers, for service in California and during the war with Mexico, was raised in 1846 during the Mexican-American War by Jonathan D. Stevenson, accepted by the United States Army on August 1846. The 1st Regiment of New York Volunteers was transported around Cape Horn to California, where it served as garrisons in Monterey, Santa Barbara, Los Angeles and San Diego. Elements of the volunteers under Lieutenant Colonel Henry Stanton Burton were involved in operations of the Pacific Coast Campaign in Baja California, captured and garrisoned towns there, fighting in the Battle of La Paz, Siege of La Paz, and defeated local forces at the Skirmish of Todos Santos after the peace was negotiated in 1848. The regiment was then evacuated from Baja California and disbanded in California on August, September and October 1848. History. Originally formed as the 7th Regiment of New York Volunteers upon the request of President James K. Polk by New York State Legislator Jonathan D. Stevenson, Secretary of War William L. Marcy directed Stevenson that the regiment should be composed of unmarried men of good habits and varied pursuits, and such as would be likely to remain in California or adjoining territory at the close of the war. The New York Legion departed New York the 27th of September 1846 aboard 5 ships, including the Susan Drew Luchu and Thos H. Perkins, arriving in San Francisco the 19th of March 1847. Companies D, E, G, and I were transported by storeship to the California capital Monterey. For this post, companies of the regiment were deployed by ship to Lower California, where they participated in the battles of La Paz and the final skirmish of Todos Santos. It is said of Co. D. This company was without doubt the last command of American troops to leave the soil of Mexico after the close of the Mexican War. During the regiment's tour of service in California, portions of the regiment were dispatched throughout California in search of Indian horse thieves. Much of the 1st NY was disbanded in early 1848. Many names formed as the 7th Regiment New York Volunteers, commonly referred to in New York as the California Guard of the California Regiment. Since the 7th NY was composed of infantry, cavalry, and artillery, the regiment was also called the New York Legion, finally redesignated in early 1848 by the War Department as the 1st Regiment New York Volunteers, for service in California and during the war with Mexico, now also called the 1st New York Legion. However, this fact was not well known outside of California, and thus another regiment formed in New York by Colonel Ward B. Burnett served in Mexico as the 1st Regiment New York Volunteers during the war, but was redesignated by the War Department as the 2nd Regiment of New York Volunteers during the war with Mexico. Field Officers: Colonel Jonathan D. Stevenson, Lt. Colonel Henry S. Burton, Major James A. Hardy, 2nd Lt. U.S. 3rd Artillery Regiment. Staff Officers: Surgeon Alexander Perry, ASSD; Surgeon Robert Murray, ASSD; Surgeon William C. Parker; Captain William G. Marcy, Commissary. Adjutants: 1st Lieutenant Henry C. Matzel, 1st Lieutenant John C. Bonnycastle, Captain Joseph L. Folsom, ASSD; Quartermaster. Non-commissioned staff: Sergeant Major Alexander C. McDonald, Quartermaster Sergeant Stephen Harris, Quartermaster Sergeant George G. Belt, Quartermaster Sergeant James C. Lowe. Sutlers Department: Sutler Samuel W. Haight, Clerk James C. L. Wadsworth. Company A Captain Seymour G. Steele, 1st Lieutenant George S. Penrose, Acting Commissary and Quartermaster, 2nd Lieutenant Charles Benjamin Young, 2nd Lieutenant George Francis Lemon, Sergeant Sherman O. Houghton, Sergeant Walter Chipman, Sergeant Edward Irwin, Company B Captain James M. Turner, 1st Lieutenant Henry C. Matzel, 2nd Lieutenant Thomas E. Getcham, 2nd Lieutenant E. Gould Buffum, Sergeant James Stanton, Sergeant Charles C. Scott, Sergeant John Wilt, Sergeant Charles Richardson, Sergeant James D. Denniston. Company C Captain John E. Brackett, 1st Lieutenant William R. Tremels, 1st Lieutenant Thomas J. Roach, 2nd Lieutenant Theron R. Purley, 2nd Lieutenant Charles C. Anderson, 2nd Lieutenant George D. Brewerton, appointed U.S. 1st Infantry Regiment, Sergeant Edmund P. Crosby, Sergeant William Johnson, Sergeant George Robinson, Company D Captain Henry M. Nagerly, 1st Lieutenant George A. Pendleton, 2nd Lieutenant Hiram W. Thiel, 2nd Lieutenant Joseph C. Moorhead, Sergeant Aaron Lyons, Sergeant William Roach, Sergeant Henry J. Wilson. Company E Captain Nelson Taylor, 1st Lieutenant Edwards Williams, 2nd Lieutenant William E. Cuttrell, 2nd Lieutenant Thomas L. Vermoyler, Sergeant John M. O'Neill, Sergeant Henry S. Morton, Sergeant James Manice, Sergeant Abraham Van Riper, Company F Captain Francis J. Lippett, 1st Lieutenant Henry Storrow Carnes, 2nd Lieutenant William H. Vyrick, 2nd Lieutenant John M. Hardart, Sergeant James Queen, Sergeant Thomas Hipwood, Sergeant James Mulvey, Sergeant John C. Pullis, Company G Captain Matthew R. Stevenson, 2nd Lieutenant John McHenry Hollingsworth, 2nd Lieutenant Jeremiah Sherwood, 2nd Lieutenant William H. Smith, Sergeant Walter Taylor, Sergeant William B. Travers, Sergeant James Meehan, Sergeant John Connell, Sergeant George Jackson, Company H Captain John B. Frisbee, 1st Lieutenant Edward Gilbert, 2nd Lieutenant John S. Day, Sergeant Eleazar Frisbee, Sergeant William Grow, Sergeant Henry A. Schoolcraft, Sergeant James Winner, Company J Captain William E. Shannon, 1st Lieutenant Henry McGee, 2nd Lieutenant Palmer B. Hewlett, Sergeant Joseph Evans, Sergeant Joshua S. Vincent, Sergeant B. Logan, Company K Captain Kimball H. Dimmick, 1st Lieutenant George C. Hubbard, 2nd Lieutenant John S. Norris, 2nd Lieutenant Roderick M. Morrison, Sergeant Jackson Sellers,